And good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's another exciting edition of the Weekly Pitch. I'm Matt Price, coming to you from my house in Rockland County, New York. Well, ESPN just released its top 10 list, so my panel and I tonight will discuss what we agree on when it comes to that list, as well as who our top 10 players are in the NBA all time. We'll also discuss a major ruling that a major school system put out there as it might affect fall athletics and even fall classes in the upcoming fall semester. So with that, I would like to welcome in my panel for tonight. It's just a three-person panel, myself, James Murphy, and Bryan Hultgren. And Bryan Hultgren is actually putting on
the thing is, I'm running away right now. I'm running away because, quite frankly, this whole chat room is filled with Yankee love, and that stuff is contagious. Hence the mask.
Oh man, Bryan Hultgren.
I wouldn't say it unless it were true.
Ladies and gentlemen,
James, you're off though.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Weekly Pitch.
I taste quite a bit of salt.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Weekly Pitch Comedy Hour. Oh man, Bryan Hultgren making some history tonight as he is joining us from a mode of transportation. He is on a train right now. Is that correct, Bryan?
Yep, I'm currently on my way home from my job in New York City. Not going to give too much details about that, but all in all, I'm enjoying myself, and I think so. I got a good connection, got a charger that can plug in my phone, so let's go. Let's have some fun. Let's do this.
Let's have some fun indeed. All right, well, the NBA has its top 10 players out, well, at least when it comes to ESPN, and I gotta tell you, it was a very interesting list, but there's one thing that I think we can all agree with, and that is the number one player of all time is the star of the Last Dance documentary series and probably the greatest NBA player of all time, the greatest Chicago Bull of all time, Mr. 6 NBA title, two-time three-peat, Michael Jordan. Do you all agree?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I mean, it's not even a discussion. Like, I personally would even argue that Michael Jordan is probably not just the best basketball player of all time. He's probably the single greatest athlete in North American sports history. Like, he's right up there with me with Muhammad Ali. Because really, like, every time we talk about greatness in terms of professional sports, or even sports in general, the one conversation piece that's always been the same. So-and-so is like the Michael Jordan of this sport. Like, could this player in the NBA compete with Michael Jordan in Michael's era? I mean, when you just talk about dominance, competitiveness, and in terms of athletic skill, he's everything you ever wanted in a player, and he's got all the stats, the rings, and the accomplishments to back it up. It's not even close.
James, your take.
So, for me, deciding between Jordan and LeBron was a bit more difficult. I think that LeBron was just a little bit more complete and that he had to carry a very heavy load, especially considering the lack of support he got. But what put Jordan over the top for me was a few things. For one thing, no one got nearly as much media publicity as he did. For another thing, no one scored as much as he did under quite as much adversity. Yeah, LeBron got close, but I mean, you look at a lot of the things that are portrayed through The Last Dance, and you see just that he didn't win early. You guys, as I'm sure you guys are familiar with now at this point, for the first, I want to say 5-6 years of his career, he struggled, and every great player is going to need help. But aside from that, no one got as much publicity as he did. No one changed the game like he did, and it's just really, really hard to top that.
It really is hard to top that. And you think about what Michael Jordan has done all this time. This is his numbers. 1984 to 1993, and after a year off from basketball, 1995 to 1998, with the Chicago Bulls. Tremendous career. Tremendous. And then came out of retirement between 01 and 03 to play for the Washington Wizards. You also look at his points per game. He averaged over 30 points per game in his entire career. Barely anyone has ever done that in the history of the National Basketball Association. 6.2 rebounds per game, 5.3 assists per game, 2.3 steals per game. This guy was just all over the place. No question he's a top player in all of the NBA. I mean, if anyone, I would be very surprised if there's someone out there, and look, I would not blame anyone who is a very young person right now and then would grow up to be an adult and say LeBron James is number one player. I would not blame those people one bit. But if you were around when Michael Jordan was in the NBA and then it was LeBron, then you could argue that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time. Bryan, let me ask you this. Speaking of LeBron, since LeBron, in your mind, is not the top player of all time, and I totally understand where you're coming from, where would you rank LeBron?
All right, so why don't I just go into my list real quickly.
Looks like we're starting to lose Bryan. You know what, Bryan? Before we get to you, let's go to Bryan. It looks like we're
Michael Jordan is at number one. At number two, I got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Matt?
Looks like
we're starting. Kareem.
Yeah, he said Kareem. You know what? Let's get back to. It looks like we're losing Bryan here. It looks like he's in a bit of a bad location right now on the train. Let's go. Let's go to you, James. Let's go to you, James. If you can hear me, where would you put LeBron on your list?
I would put LeBron second. I mean, again, he's very close to Jordan in a lot of aspects, and you could argue he did a few things better than Jordan. He played in a slightly more competitive league. He played with slightly less support around him. He played with he had to deal with a lot of flack from his GM. As much as we rag on Jerry Krause throughout this documentary, at least he got them to play Michael Jordan the players he needed to help him succeed. Like, I mean, Dan Gilbert didn't even give him the time of day. Sure, Jerry Krause got a little envious towards the end, and throughout the process you could see it, but at least he put in the work. Dan Gilbert couldn't even do that, but that's not the whole point. The reason why I put LeBron number two is because we haven't seen anyone since Jordan who has been able to be as consistently good as they were like LeBron did. You're talking about a guy who barely got hurt, and the only time he did it was like sometime last year. This was a guy who went to, I think it was 8 straight finals. This is a guy who has won titles in two different cities, and might be very close to 3 if things keep going with the way they are with the Lakers. So, this is probably a little bit biased considering I don't really know a league where LeBron James isn't at least the top 5 best player in the league, but still, from what I've seen, it's hard to put him anywhere lower than that.
That's actually a very good point. So, Bryan, first of all, sorry about that. It seems we lost.
Yeah, no problem. We're going through like some rocky areas, but
yeah, no problem. So go on with your list. The last time we heard you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar number 2.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 2. Like, because with Kareem, I could pretty much make the same exact argument with Kareem. I mean, when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in his prime, he was undoubtedly the best basketball player in the world. I mean, 6 of 10 years in the 1970s, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the league MVP. He, like Michael Jordan, was a 6-time NBA champion and the innovator of probably the greatest shot in all of basketball, the skyhook. I mean, it's still iconic and is still one of the most unguardable shots in all of basketball to this day. At 3, I got Magic Johnson. In my opinion, the greatest point guard in all of sports. And I think while Kareem was a better player, Magic Johnson was the engine behind the Showtime Lakers in the 80s. I think he was the greatest assist man in basketball. He could move the ball around tremendously and just as well take leadership for himself. Like Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals. That's probably the greatest performance in any NBA Finals game, period. I mean, you can make an argument, and he was playing at a center. You could stick him anywhere, and he could just ball out. And now I got LeBron James. LeBron for me
What?
is number 4. LeBron is at 4 because, here's my thing with LeBron James. For me, it's a couple things. Number 1, the 5 finals losses. I mean, yes, some of them were not his fault, and he was basically by himself, but it's still a pretty bad number considering, some of the games he had. 2011 NBA Finals where he only had 8 points against the Dallas Mavericks.
Right.
That is one of the worst performances in his entire career. And for me, LeBron I think, what Michael Jordan had, one of the reasons I consider him the best is that when he walked into the arena, when he walked into the league, he thought he was the best, and he was going to prove it to everyone, and he was going to take leadership wherever he could.
Oop.
I think we lost him again.
Yeah, it looks like we lost Brian.
Didn't really
there we go.
have that when he first came to the league. There was a player in 2 other cities, and I will also say this for LeBron. If he wins a title with the Lakers, I don't think you could just argue him as the second best or the third best. I think you can make the argument that he is the best overall if he gets 1 ring, just 1 with the Lakers, because you'll be able to say he won it with 3 teams. And that's something for most players in the NBA that's unheard of.
It is unheard of when you try to win championships with 3 different teams. I mean, usually you hear that with just 1 or 2 teams, but it's another thing when you try to win with 3 teams. So I see your point there. But what is mind-boggling, Brian, this is where I disagree, and I think James would disagree with me. And James, if you want to chip in here, go right ahead. But I'm very surprised at you, Brian. I am very shocked that you do not have, and look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm very shocked that you do not have LeBron James, who is right now the best player in the NBA throughout our modern generation right now. And this is the guy, look, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. Championships don't define you as the best or one of the best players of all time, okay? But LeBron James, despite those 5 finals losses, made it to 8 consecutive
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that.
finals. 8 consecutive NBA finals, both with the Heat and the Cavaliers, which is totally unheard of. And look, I give you credit for putting him in your top 5, but you don't put him in your top 3?
To back up Matt's point just a little bit, Brian, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it, James.
All right, so to back up Matt's point, obviously what happens when you get to those finals is a whole different story. But when I mentioned that LeBron did a lot of things that no one else did, the 8 straight finals is one of them. I mean, you just don't see anyone doing that kind of thing, especially in a league where we have an increasing amount of parity. And I want to go back to those finals just for a second. So first finals was in, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, it was 2011. Lost to the Dallas Mavericks with Dirk in his prime. All right.
Yes, it was. It was because that was LeBron's, I believe, first year with the Heat.
Yes, that was his first year, and then he won the 2 straight.
And then then he won 2 straight. Then lost to the Greg Popovich-led San Antonio Spurs. Quite good for their time. Especially when you compare them to other teams like the Lakers, who were also doing very well at that general time. And then they lost to – then the next finals, he goes back to Cleveland, and he faces the Warriors, where both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love gets hurt. You know who's number 2 is? Some guy named Matthew Dellavedova.
Yes.
Have you heard of Matthew Dellavedova?
Matthew Dellavedova, of
Not in a
course.
while.
Did you hear of him until that point, Matt?
That was the first year I had heard of him.
My point exactly. The next year he wins. We all know that story. We lived it. We know this. And then the next 2 years. So after that 2016 win, the Golden State Warriors decided to get Kevin Durant. And throughout the 2016-2017 season, LeBron keeps saying, we need another playmaker. We need another playmaker. We need another playmaker. And this is where the lack of support comes in. Because when LeBron asked for that playmaker, do you know what they gave him?
Tell him, James.
They gave him Kyle Korver. That's it.
Okay.
They didn't go out and get Paul George. They didn't go out and get Russell Westbrook. They didn't get the Claw. They didn't get any of those guys. They got Kyle Korver.
They didn't even get Carmelo.
Playmaker.
Okay.
Carmelo.
Okay.
I don't
Can I
get it.
please chime in? Can I please chime in now?
Yes, go right ahead. Go right
So first off, yeah, I'm not dismissing LeBron James' 8 straight finals appearances. That's part of why he's got him in there. But again, let's go back to those finals performances. 2011, the 8-point game. They were supposed to be by far and away the favorite that year, and LeBron cracked under the pressure because he couldn't step into the leadership role. Then he won the 2 straight. Okay, I'll give you the Spurs. I'll give you the Warriors loss. The Spurs were slightly better with Kawhi and Duncan, and 2015 didn't go his way. 2017, though, that team was still at full strength and were still able to carry their load like against the Warriors the previous year. And in 2017, the year after that, let's remember, LeBron James pretty much ran Kyrie Irving off of Cleveland. You probably could have kept Kyrie for one more year, but he ran him off.
But you still had J.R. Smith. You still had J.R. Smith. You had him on
Smith. Thing clear.
Okay.
The actions following Kyrie leaving have proven that he was the one who wanted out. LeBron did not force him out of anything. You could hype all that up about, LeBron was so hard to play. And I'm sure it is hard to play with one of the bigger guys on the team, as it builds a lot of intensity that can be hard to keep up with at times. But ultimately, it was Kyrie's decision because he wanted to be his own guy, which so far has not been working out well for him. As a Celtics fan who I'm sure was hoping for a title with Kyrie, and now is going to be watching him on the Nets for the next couple of years.
Okay, but like I was also saying, you mentioned LeBron had their dominance. Like I was saying with Kareem, though, he was undoubtedly the most talented player in all of basketball those years, and it wasn't even close. And then when he got to the Showtime Lakers, the reason why I still think Magic was slightly better was because with Magic, like LeBron was a guy you could put anywhere on the court. He had the size, he had the strength, and the speed to be one of the best assist men in all of basketball. He could take leadership for himself, especially towards the later years when Kareem was starting to slow down. And say what you want about Magic, I think he could have survived in the league for a little longer if it were not for his diagnosis when he got diagnosed with HIV.
I can agree with that. No, I can agree with that. Look, here's
if someone was to put LeBron James at 2, I got no argument against it. But for me, it's just I think Magic and Kareem just shined a little bit more for me personally.
Well, look, here's the thing, Brian. We're giving you the benefit of the doubt because you had LeBron James as a top 5 player, no doubt.
I'm not Skip Bayless. And I'm going to put him in the lower 10s. No, I recognize
which you should. The thing is, I think LeBron is a little bit better than Magic, and the reason why I say is because Magic Johnson did not, even though, yes, he was, you could say, a one-man wrecking crew, and that he also had great talent with him every single year that he played in the league. But at the same time, he didn't have that much success that LeBron James has had. And look, again,
Magic Johnson's a 5-time NBA Finals champion. Pretty much every single year in the 80s, the Lakers were in contention for the finals or in the finals.
But how many times have they made the finals? How many times did they make the finals with Magic Johnson?
They made it pretty much every year in the 80s, and I can even go fact check it for you right now.
All right, you can do that. And the thing that I am thinking, James, you understand where I'm coming from, is that LeBron James and here, James, I'll put you on here, is that LeBron James was practically a guy who made it to almost every single final, and he could have possibly made it to another final had it not been for the Raptors. Would you agree with that?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Oh wait, you know what? I literally just screwed myself up there because LeBron James, I forgot, is not with the Cavs anymore. He's with the Lakers.
Yeah. By the way, to answer your question real quickly,
just hold on a second, Brian. I'll get you in a sec. But I just want to say that when it came to LeBron James, had he not gotten hurt last year with the Lakers, it's possible the Lakers could have made maybe a finals run and they could have made it to a 9th straight final. James, you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I think they definitely would have made the playoffs, but I think last year there wasn't quite as much star power for him to work with, so he would have been in a situation similar to the year before where he's just carrying around a bunch of B- B guys who were slightly better than Cleveland, but ultimately would force him to do more work than at his age he is capable of doing or willing to do. But still, I think it would have been interesting to see those games against the Warriors or even those games against whoever else was at the top at the time, or the Rockets or the Blazers or even the Thunder. But yes, I guess it's just going to be one of those unsolved mysteries. I along with you, thought they probably would have made it if he wasn't hurt, even if it was for just a shorter period of time.
Brian, you have a fact check for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the fact check. So between 1979 and 1991, Magic Johnson made the NBA Finals 9 times. 9 times he made the NBA Finals, and he won 5. So he made it just as much as LeBron, and he got over the finish line more than LeBron. And also one other point I forgot to mention, the competition. I mean, they were going up against another potential dynasty in the 80s with the Boston Celtics being led by Larry Bird, who ironically is my 5th player overall on my list. Like, if we want to get into that, but if you want to carry this on, I could keep unless you, I could keep going with talk about Larry Bird if you want.
You could, sure. But one thing I want to say about Magic Johnson, just want to remind you, in his entire career, if you do the career average, he scored less than 20 points per game, 19.5.
But that was his position, though. Magic's position, he was the point guard, so he was the one distributing the ball and passing it around most of the time. LeBron was the position that was putting up the shots more. Like, so I don't really hold that against Magic. But anyway, like number 5, as I was saying, Larry Bird. Like, personally, I think Larry Bird, you could probably argue, was a better player than Magic. Magic, you could have just argued, was on better teams and obviously got a bit more clutch when it came to it over Larry. But anyway, with Larry Bird, I think, could be argued as he did as the best small forward of all time. I mean, I think he was a better defender than like LeBron James, who's obviously number 1 overall in his position. But I think Larry was a more talented player. He was a more elevated player. One of the best three-point shooters in all of basketball, and basically just someone who could – I don't know why I'm blanking right now. I'm sorry. I'm very tired. It's been a long day.
Yeah, you're fine, Brian. You're fine.
Yeah, but again, Larry Bird, it's like I think he probably could have won at least 1 or 2 more rings if it weren't for back injuries. Injuries are what killed his career and basically what kept him off the court. If that didn't happen to him, I think he probably could have kept going and possibly gotten another couple of rings with Boston. And basically, just real quickly, just throw out the rest of my list. I got Kobe at 6, Tim Duncan at 7, I got Shaq at 8, Bill Russell at 9, and rounding out my 10, I got Hakeem Olajuwon.
Really? You have someone who is not in ESPN's top 10 in your top 10?
It was really close. Like, I wanted to say Wilt Chamberlain, but the problem was, the thing is, one, the NBA was a much different animal way back in the 60s. There were only like about 10 teams and not as much television viewership or like media to go around to watch those games. And obviously Bill Russell won a majority of them. And so ultimately I just went with Hakeem just because, right in Michael Jordan's draft class, it was between him and Jordan. I think while Jordan was a brighter player, shined brighter, and obviously was on much better teams, Hakeem was still a freaking monster. And ultimately, he did win back-to-back NBA Finals championships, but really leaves you wondering, if Rockets were able just to give him a few more pieces, I think they definitely could have made something more with him.
So, James, there's something that I think we should talk about. Speaking of the top 10, first of all, I give Brian a round of applause for putting Kobe Bryant at number 6. I personally would have had him as a top 5. That's just my personal opinion, okay? Yeah. But I applaud him for putting Bryant at number 6, and let me tell you why. Obviously, Kobe Bryant is a top 10 player, James. We all know that. But I think, and look, I love ESPN, but for ESPN to put Kobe Bryant at number 9 all time instead of moving him up the ladder, I thought was flat out blasphemous. And I'm not saying that because Kobe passed away, and may he and his daughter rest in peace. But I seriously believe Kobe Bryant is a top 5 player, if not higher, at least, than number 9. I think that is just blasphemous, and I'm not denying that the other players in the top 10 list are great. They really are fantastic. greatest players in NBA history. But I think it's blasphemous that Kobe Bryant is number 9 and not anywhere where our good friend Bryan Hultgren put him, which is number 6. Where would you put him, James?
Well, I would also think the ESPN list is blasphemous if I didn't also put him at number 9, just a shade behind Shaq. Just a shade. You see how close this is? That's how close they are. All right, and here's what it comes down to for me. When I look at Kobe, obviously it was fantastic. Obviously it was huge for his team. But there's a few things that stand out to me. One, there was often a lot of question about whether he was the best guy on his own team. There was a lot of reason to believe that Shaq's dominance in the paint, his ability to outmatch anyone as a center was unlike anything the league had ever seen. And there's a lot of reason to believe that Kobe would not have had the same dominance if he had to carry them without Shaq by his side, or without even the supporting cast of guys like Gasol or the people who helped him to win his latter 2 titles. But another thing that really pops out to me is, as great as he was, I feel like he was a little bit more along the lines of Jordan 2.0. He was a little bit more like a similar copy of him. Obviously, not that it's a bad thing. Obviously, it helped his teams for the better, but it's not quite as original. Obviously, the work ethic is an entirely different thing. He revolutionized the league with that.
Yeah,
but in terms of athletic ability, I'd put him just a shade under Shaq. And it's not so much that he's not as good. It's that there are just so many other really, really good players.
But wait a minute. Here's where I think you draw a line. When it comes to the time when Bryan and Shaq were on the Lakers together and they won titles together, they were in the playoffs together and so on, they had all that success together. Can't you draw a line where you say it doesn't matter who led the way for who and who drove the team more than the other, and just say both were great at their prime? Kobe Bryant was always great. He always had a prime. Even in years where he struggled, he always had a prime. Same with Shaquille O'Neal when they were both on the Lakers together. That's where I think a line is crossed, because it doesn't matter who carried the team or who led the way for the other. They were both fantastic, and they both had almost the same amount of success during their time when they were on the Lakers.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think the question really just becomes, it's not necessarily about who was the better player. I think it's just more so like about who would you really build your team around? And look, I love Kobe, but during a lot of his earlier years when he was with Shaq, he still had a lot of learning and he had a lot of growing to do. Because you got to remember, and even Shaq kind of alluded to it, there were times where he kind of was a little selfish as a player. The story with Shaq about how Kobe wanted to take all the shots. He was souring a lot of relationships earlier in his career, and obviously it got better as it went along.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, for me with Kobe, why I have him at 6 is because obviously James kind of alluded to this earlier, but because someone in his position did it better, and that was obviously Michael Jordan. And obviously Kobe will even tell you this himself if he were still here, God rest his soul. But everything that we see from Kobe today came from Michael Jordan. And that's not a knock on Kobe. He did it fantastically, and he was dominant. But obviously a lot of inspiration came from MJ, so you got to put MJ above him. And the thing is, what I think really for me keeps him out of the top 5 for me is just that, if you ask me right now, who would I want to build a team with? Kobe Bryant.
Hey, who would you want to build
your
team with?
Yeah, and here's my thing with Kobe. If it was I have 30 seconds left, down by 2, I got one guy to take the shot, LeBron or Kobe, I'd probably go with Kobe. But if you're asking me who do I want to build a team with, I got to go with LeBron. LeBron was just, I think, the more dominant player of his era. He was bigger. I think he put up better shooting numbers than Kobe in the, especially when we got closer into the postseason, where Kobe did not really get as many game-winning shots as he did in the regular season. And I just think LeBron, I think, was more of an overall package in terms of scoring, defense, and everything like that. Kobe was great, but I just think the dominance of LeBron and just the fact that he was the second best of his position behind MJ is just what keeps him out of the top 5. But it was by this much. Kobe nearly made it by this much, but yeah.
It's really something. It's really something that even when it comes to top 10 lists, there's always a debate, like the debate we're having right now. It's always something up for discussion. Like, why do they have it here? Why do they have him here? Look at me. I'm questioning it right now. And I even question Brian's list, even though I can mostly agree with some of it. But I just find it fascinating. Another player that we should talk about is Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan, he's one guy we have not talked about yet on this list. So according to ESPN, Tim Duncan is number 8 all time on their list. Brian, you have Duncan a step forward at number 7, lucky 7. Why'd you put him at lucky 7?
I think overall, like, they pretty much got it's really not by that much of a difference. Like, for me, again, it's just the fact that, like, is, again, because I had to move Russell down. Because, like I mentioned earlier, the era that Russell was playing in, the fact that we don't have access to a lot of these games, that the league wasn't as big or as dominant as it was, like, when it got in the 80s and eventually into today. But, like, again, Tim Duncan. I think Tim Duncan, in all seriousness, I think he's probably the most underrated player on this top 10 list. And I don't think gets nearly enough love and respect as he deserves. I mean, this guy was one LeBron James NBA Finals away. Like, Ray Allen, if he doesn't hit that shot, we're talking about Tim Duncan being 6-0 in NBA Finals. Like, that is really something insane if you really do think about it. But getting back to it again, Tim Duncan, I just think was I think one of the best overall packages you really want to build your team around. He was a guy that was he was a great shooter on the court. He could move the ball around really well. He was a solid defensive player, great footwork, great mechanics, just a great fundamental player. And he was just always fun to watch. And I think really carried, like, the system that Greg Popovich wanted to execute with those Spurs teams. Like, it was near flawless with them.
James, let's go to you and stay on Tim Duncan because Brian made a very good point. If it wasn't for Ray Allen in that Game 6 of I believe it was the 2013 NBA Finals, it was the 2013 NBA Finals Game 6, and if it wasn't for Ray Allen, he's right. Tim Duncan would have had a 6th title, but still 5 titles and just over 1,000 career regular season victories. Not to mention that he spent all 20 years with the same team. He literally was like Derek Jeter. He played all 20 seasons with the San Antonio Spurs from 97 to 2016, and he also averaged 19 points per game and averaged almost 11 rebounds per game in his entire career. Would you have him higher than 7 on your list? Because quite personally, I'd put him at a 6. And I'm not just saying that because he's a modern player, like in our era, but that's the kind of player he was. He was always a great teammate. He barely got into any trouble. He was a team player all around, and he knew how to win. I would have him at like a 6 and not a 7 compared to Brian's list or the ESPN's list. Where would you put him?
So in regards to the rankings, I have him at a soft 10. And again, I will say Brian makes a lot of excellent points. He's for sure the most underrated player on this list. And his consistency is, if we were going on consistency alone, then he's probably top 5. But at the same time, I feel like the thing that made him most noteworthy could, in this case, be the thing that holds him back a little, and that is that he was a big team basketball player. Now, obviously, for your career, that works perfectly fine because you're obviously a great teammate. You help to be a part of a bigger system like he was with Greg Popovich and Ginobili and Parker and all those guys. But at the same time, it doesn't do you quite as much of it does you more of a disservice in a debate that talks about individual players. Now, in terms of that, he definitely has the statistics to do it, again, because he was consistently very good. He never really took as many big risks. If he wouldn't really push for any big plays, he'd usually take what was given to him and not really bite off more than he could chew. And that was the case throughout his career. You can see it in his 5 championships and his only 1 finals loss, and you see it in his 1,000 career wins. But so again, great team guy, but if we're talking about greatest player, it kind of hinders his case a little bit.
That's a fair argument. It really is a fair argument. However, I would not put him at right on the edge of a top 10. He's definitely a top 10 player. I think we can agree he's a top 10 player. And in regards to Tony Parker, I don't think of him as a top 10 player, but I think of him as a top 20 player because he was also a guy who knew how to win. He was a guy who knew how to win. He and Tim Duncan were teammates for a very, very long time, and they both had the chemistry to lead the Spurs to not just on a playoff run, because obviously there were years where they were knocked out early, but also on a finals run. So I think that's where we'll leave the top 10 or top 20 discussion. So, hey, this was a great debate. I'm glad that we talked about these lists, but now we got to talk about another serious topic. Hey, first time in the virtual version of the weekly pitch that we're talking about a second topic. And this one is a very serious topic. So for those who do not know, this past week, the California state system announced that, or at least the California State University system, announced that classes were going to be held online for the upcoming fall 2020 semester. Now, as of right now, that plan is going to take into effect. It's going to go into effect. The question is, let's say things get better around that time, will plans change? Honestly, I don't think it will. But this is very, very serious because obviously we're living in really bad times right now with the coronavirus pandemic. And at the same time, again, we're learning something new every single day, especially on the academic side and even the athletic side, because now when it comes to California State, if you don't have students coming during the fall semester, that means you don't have the student athletes coming during the fall semester, and that means they may not have athletics at all. So now, James, you and I were talking in the group chat. In fact, you were talking to all of us in the group chat, I should say. And you said you had a lot to say about the California State University system making its decision. So why don't you take the screen? The screen's yours.
Well, I'll start off by confirming a couple of points you made. For one thing, we certainly are living in dangerous times, and as a result, there's just not as much information to draw from. We don't know quite as much about the coronavirus, and things could change at the drop of a hat, both for better and for worse. And we're just kind of at a place in life where you need to outline the rest of your life and your future in pencil, not pen. But at the same time, if that's going to be the case, and if we don't know what's going on, then I don't understand where California State University system is coming from, making a decision that is frankly way too far ahead for us to really be thinking about. Now, look, I get it that these times are bad, and we don't know what's going to happen, but we simply do not have enough information to be making any sort of judgments that go to August and beyond. Now, if we're talking about June and July, sure, but we don't know what's going to happen in August. For all we know, all those reports about how the coronavirus doesn't spread as much in the summer could be true, and you could only see as much as, like, let's say 12 infections per day. Like, it could be very, very low. So it's just no one is in a position to be – I just don't understand what California – maybe they because I doubt they know more than we do. They don't know as much as we. They don't know as much. They don't know more than other states do. They know as little as we do, maybe even less. But I just don't understand it, because at this point, maybe it sounds selfish, but it's not fair to a lot of the people involved. It's not fair to the teachers who are coming in on a lower budget than they deserve. It's not fair to the student athletes who are trying to compete for a championship of some sort. It's not fair to a lot of the employees whose jobs are really close to the school. And it's just something that I hope as time goes on can change somehow, because again, it's just too far ahead to make a decision on it. We don't have enough data. And until there is,
yeah. Yeah,
And I
and
just like
yeah,
I
go
want
ahead,
to
Brian.
piggyback on that for a second. It's going to hurt recruiting too, because in a way, it's kind of saying to me is that they're not really being committal about trying to make the athletic season happen. And look, I'm kind of with you. It's unusual times, obviously, but it's in the same breath. You still got to make an effort. You got to show commitment that you're trying to get these schools open and you're trying to get these teams on the field. Because for a lot of these athletes, this is what they're going to that school for. They're going for that chance to play for a college athletics team. And the fact that their season is probably just going to be yanked away from them, it's going to hurt recruiting because it's going to basically drive them away. And they're going to have nothing to wow your potential recruits with. It's going to hurt the student athletes because some of them may be willing to transfer if the other schools are going to be open to play. And it's basically just going to hurt overall, I think, revenue as well because a lot of these schools, they're going to be charging for tickets. They're going to be charging for concessions and parking and everything. You're taking away a lot of like the spirit and a lot of the revenue away from your program. And it's just, I understand it's unusual times, but you gotta still make some bit of an effort. It's just a really bad message that they're sending. Like, just for comparison for a second, UConn Athletics. UConn just released their season ticket packages the other day for their season ticket holders. They're still trying to advocate for the upcoming basketball seasons. And guess what? We don't know for certain if the basketball season is going to happen yet or if there are going to be any fans. But at least they're showing somewhat of a commitment. I'm not getting anything from this from Southern Cal. It's a really bad look.
And I'll give you another example to go off of before we get to your point, Matt, if you don't mind.
Go for it. Yeah, go right ahead, James.
Okay, so to use another example, so Matt and I and Brian all either go to or went to, I think, a college at some point. As it stands now, obviously they did what every other school did. They put the semester online. They put the rest of the semester online. And graduation, actually, we are thankful that at this moment in time, as of this recording right now, it is scheduled to happen sometime in August.
This was going to be my point. Yeah, go right ahead, James. This was exactly going to be my point. Yes.
It was. But they have not made a decision about next semester or graduation, which while it is their plan for those to go as planned, that did not come out right. It is not. While it is in their best hopes that those go on as scheduled, they're not sure. But they're not making a decision yet. Do you know when they're going to make a decision? Late June, when there's way more information out about this, when there's more numbers to go off of, when we know more about the virus itself, and when we know more about how it affects people. It's just, listen, again, I understand that things are changing really, really quick, but in times of struggle, no matter what it is, whether it's a pandemic or whether you were dealing in the past with things like the financial crisis or even 9/11, cooler heads prevail. The people that wait for all the accurate information to come out, the people that take the time to analyze what is going on and how far you can forecast, the people who can talk to others and really make sure that you can get the best possible situation out of it while trying to appease as many people as you can and find the proper avenues to find that sort of efficiency to get towards your goal. I hope that came out right. But my point is...
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, James.
Ithaca has set, at least in our mind, a pretty good example. Am I biased? Absolutely. But still, I think they set a fairly good example of how to approach this whole thing. They didn't even go straight from having the semester as it was to going remote for the rest of the semester. They had a temporary plan, and then they went to it.
Yep.
It's just that you need to take your time. You can't just make these decisions on impulse. Cooler heads have to prevail. That's what history has taught us going back hundreds of years. Cooler heads prevail.
Right, and right now, we don't know when it comes to our school, James and Brian. We do not know if our commencement is going to be canceled. We just don't know. Remember, there were schools who did decide to cancel commencement once everything started to break out. There was, I think the University of Michigan, they were one of the first schools to make this move. And it was really, really shocking. I thought for a moment they were going to postpone. They didn't postpone. They just flat out canceled it. Did not see that coming. All right. And now we have this is the one thing that really really shocked me when it came to the Cal State decision. So I'm looking at the LA Times because they put out an article about this week, and I'm reading a passage here, and this is really shocking. So James, Bryan, brace yourselves. Everyone else who's watching at home, brace yourselves. According to this passage, it says it also follows an earlier move by Cal State Fullerton, which in late April, they became one of the first universities in the nation to announce it was planning for remote instruction this fall. They made an announcement of a plan to do that this fall in April, last month, before the year was even over. I mean, right now, yes, California does have a lot of cases. And right now the numbers are going to go up. Hopefully they go down soon. I really hope California flattens the curve over the summer. I really do. Okay? But for them to make a decision like that, I guess you could say, and James, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm using the word wrong here, premature move to, and I understand why they did it, but at the same time, it's too early. That was April. This isn't May. And when they made the decision this week, everyone was in finals week pretty much. I mean, it was really, really shocking. Piggyback on that, James.
Well, first of all, you did use that word right. Kudos to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Second point is that I understand that this decisions on opening up and what to do even for colleges are going to be done on a state-by-state basis. But at what cost? Because we could come to a point where everyone else has recovered and even California has recovered, but the rest of the country is going to be held back because California is doing all this with schools, which is going to affect their athletic programs who have games scheduled with other Power 5 programs. Take, for example, Penn State was supposed to host San Jose State in the season. Are they just going to not play those 11 games? It's just it just makes me feel so conflicted about this state-by-state process. And I know I'm getting really broad here, but it makes me feel very conflicted about whether the state-by-state opening is really the best thing as opposed to an entire country opening. Because at some point, we need to make some collective decisions as an entire country in order to be on the same page, because I feel like that's the only real way we're going to make the absolute best progress here.
You're absolutely right. So, Bryan, I want to piggyback on something James mentioned before, and actually I think you mentioned this too. We got to talk about an athletic perspective here, because there are going to be, after the decision that was just made, think about the football players, think about the soccer players, and any other fall sports you could think of, who are going to possibly probably enter the transfer portal. But as of right now, we don't know what other D1 schools, and you could say D2 or D3 as well, college and universities everywhere, who are going to start their sports on time, or if they're going to start at all. They might just cancel the season. We just don't know yet. But if, let's say they enter the transfer portal, they go to a school to play that exact sport, and then they realize, oh man, we're not going to be playing here either. What are they supposed to do?
It's just, this is a whole mistake situation right now. I'm kind of with you guys. It's way too early to tell anything because it's still too far off removed. We don't have enough information yet. I think that's really going to start becoming a problem, and it's going to become something that the NCAA is going to just find themselves in a deep pit hole in. And it's going to become a massive problem if they don't contain this. They need to have, I think, basically just the conferences need to get together and they need to talk about this as a whole. If they made this statement in conjuncture with, I'm getting off the train now, which is why the change.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But yeah, but
Brian's right now getting off the train at New Haven, everyone. But go ahead, Bryan.
No, West Haven.
West Haven. My apologies.
If they made this decision in conjuncture with the other conferences, okay, I could probably buy that. But they're doing this all by themselves. They're canceling it by themselves. And the whole big fear I have is just, of course, the domino effect of other schools are possibly going to be, following them in pursuit of this. And it's going to start canceling programs, canceling the seasons one by one. And it's just, the NCAA is going to get hurt really bad financially, publicly, and just from a popularity level, it's going to hurt and it's not going to end well.
Not going to end well. And the other thing that I think we should talk about, and James, if you want to piggyback on this point, go right ahead. You also think about the private schools out there, because there are private schools, including one in California, Stanford. There's Stanford. There is Notre Dame. There are schools that are thinking right now that may consider playing without everyone in the conference. And obviously that involves schools and conferences, but there are also schools that play those conferences. I mean, Notre Dame can pretty much play everyone. Stanford can play pretty much anyone. James, Bryan, our school, our alma mater, Ithaca College, they're a private school. We're a private school. So you wonder, what steps are they possibly going to take? James, do you have any idea when you think about it that way?
Well, if we're thinking about athletics, thankfully Ithaca is in a conference, the Liberty League, where a lot of the teams are in one general area that is upstate New York. Whether you want to call it upstate, that's a whole other thing. But they're in the same point is they're in the same general area, and therefore there's not going to be as much travel, so therefore not quite as much of a risk of infection. So I think that will work pretty well in their favor coming down the road. But in terms of academics, again, we don't know because there's not enough information. And until there is, I don't think we can make any predictions, and I don't think Ithaca can make any proper judgments on it.
I just want to add another thing very quickly. I just got an article from Bloomberg News, and this is the title: Coronavirus will end the golden age for college towns. Coronavirus will end the golden age for college towns. And the first paragraph really makes me feel a little nervous and saddened, and probably you'll all feel the same way, is that the coronavirus pandemic is likely to bring about many deep, long-lasting changes in U.S. society and the economy. It's difficult to predict what most of those will be. Fortunately, one likely possibility is that college towns will suffer. And when it comes to college towns like, let's say, Happy Valley in Pennsylvania, or where Notre Dame is.
South Bend.
South Bend, thank you. South Bend, Indiana. You think about our area, Ithaca, where not only Ithaca College is, but Cornell University is literally 2 minutes away. They're next door neighbors practically. You think about these college towns and you think about the athletics side. This is really going to put a major impact on things. And right now, you have schools like Cal State that are making these decisions, but we don't know if this is going to happen exactly. It's a possibility, but we just don't know because, like I said at the beginning of the segment, we're learning things day by day. Bryan, you want to piggyback on that?
Yeah, it's really just going to be pretty much my last thoughts, too, because I got to get going. But ultimately, I think it's just, again, we need more information about the coronavirus, and we need – the NCAA as a whole just needs to come up with a plan, because it's not just the conferences. Because I'm piggybacking on something James said. The conferences – a lot of places are going to be lucky to have that. My thought is going to be about the independent schools, like the BYUs, the Notre Dames. Those programs have to schedule with a lot of teams across the country to fill out their schedule. And if they can't fill out their schedule with any of those teams for cancellation purposes, it's going to hurt their season, and it's really going to hurt their
point.
They don't get conference money. They got to survive all by themselves. And again, I'm with James on this one. It's going to get worse before it gets better, in my opinion. But right now, they need to come up with a plan, and they just need to stick with it. If you can't have fans in the arena, okay, fine. If you want to try to get everyone in together, okay, fine. But if you want to cancel it, fine. Just get on the same page and make a collective decision, because I think that's the only real way that everything stays fair in the NCAA.
And
yeah, so like I said, I got to get going now. I got to get home. But great talking with you guys as always. And, have a great night, guys.
Yeah, well, first of all, Bryan, you might as well stick around because this is, in fact, the end of the show. So thank you all for joining us on this very special extended edition of the Weekly Pitch. And we will see you all, hopefully with a bigger panel, next week. For James Murphy and Bryan Hultgren, this is Matt Price, signing off.